Welcome back to Rooted in Our Ancestors' Dreams, the show where we dig deep into the past to understand our present and reimagine our future. I'm Cara, your host, and today I have with me Erin Faith Kabba from the Oya Collective. She is the CEO, author, success and legacy specialist, helping individuals and families live intentionally, heal generational wounds, and leave legacies rooted in purpose and power. Today, we will be discussing with her, we will be talking about her organization, the Oya Collective, which is helping individuals and families through the end of life process. She is a end of life doula. Welcome. Erin,
Thank you.
can you tell? Thank you. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and how you kind of got into the business of being an end of life doula?
Okay, yes. I was born and raised in Delaware, of all places. And I grew up in a very Christian, traditional, I guess, household. And I am actually an educator. So I have 15 plus years experience in as a teacher. I currently also work on the corporate side of education, but I also have my business, the Oya Collective. Now, with my business, I say that I'm a success and legacy specialist because I feel like legacy is everything. Purpose is everything. And how I, came to do this is when I was about probably maybe in like sixth or seventh grade, my great grandmother passed away. I had experienced death before that. I wasn't scared of it, but it was around that time I was so intrigued, to say the least, about death and what happens after death, what happens during death. And just as I was older, I saw how death, when we lost loved ones, I saw how the effects of what happens when people die and what they leave, what they don't leave, things that should have been handled when they were alive weren't handled. So it affects the family. I've been a witness of maybe yes, family secrets coming out after somebody dies. So just the way you live can affect, generations to come after you're gone, right? So with my business, the Oya Collective, I kind of leaned into my passion with legacy and living in your purpose. So I not only help people establish their legacies, but I also help them live in their purpose because I feel like your purpose and your legacy are connected. And I I started the business a few years ago. And first it was like a life coaching thing. And then I really sat with myself and I'm like, okay, you have this fascination or this passion or whatever, this obsession with death and legacy and things like that. And you see how people are not prepared for that. And I just wanted to help our community, especially the African American community, to know that there's more to life here and after. And I wanted to help them just prepare for that, just live their life in a way where you were born and you've done what you were born to do and you leave a legacy after and set your family up for success. So in a nutshell, I received my end of life doula certification and I sort of have been building the business ever since then. And yeah, so that's how it came about.
So, when you say Oya, does that have a special meaning, or is that is there a terminology for that, or
Yeah, it does have a special meaning. In the Yoruba tradition of Nigeria, there are certain energies. So in Ifa, it's an African traditional religion, and there are certain energies in Ifa called Orisha, and Oya is the Orisha of transformation. And she also is the Orisha that welcomes, or the energy that welcomes people to the cemetery. So she's the first energy, I think, that they meet when it's time to transition. So since Oya is all about transformation and basically legacy, up until the end, I wanted to carry on that energy. I wanted to have that energy within my business. So the Oya Collective is all about transformation and getting prepared for the end.
Okay. So how does one get into this? Like you told us a little bit about your background, but like where do you, I guess especially at that age, like where do you say this is the process that I want to go through to assist people? This is where I look up this information. Like, did you have someone that you followed, or, did you read about it somewhere?
I actually stumbled upon it. I stumbled upon the actual term end of life doula back in 2020, 2021. And I was just doing research. You know how sometimes you just go down a rabbit hole. I went through an experience, more like a deconstruction experience in a sense, in 2020. And I was just doing a lot of research and kind of leaning into unpacking some conditioning that I experienced, cultural, religious conditioning that I experienced, and actually trying to get in touch with who I was in my like authentic self. And it led me to the realization that, okay, you have this not weird obsession with death, but you're very interested in it. And I was looking at a video on, I don't know if it was about the afterlife, it was something, but you know how YouTube gives you kind of like recommended videos?
Yes.
There was a video that YouTube recommended to watch, and it was of a woman. Her name is Alua Arthur, and she was a death doula. And I was like, what is that? Because I've heard of doula before for like birth things, but I never heard of like a death doula. And so I clicked on that video, and she was talking about her experience becoming a death doula. She was a lawyer, and her brother-in-law was sick, and she ended up having to be his caregiver and take care of his estate and things like that. And I think she had learned about a death doula from somebody else. And so what she did, she actually created a program and like an academy to help people become death doulas. So I was following her for a little bit, and I was researching more about, and I realized that there are death doulas in every state. A lot of people don't know that. There are death doulas everywhere. They might not call themselves a death doula. Some people call themselves an end of life doula. Some people do the work and don't really give themselves a title. Sometimes they'll work in hospice and things like that. So Aloha Authors program, Going with Grace, I actually went through her program, Going with Grace, and I received my training there. And I did some work with a hospice that was near me to get some training. And I, started my practice. Now, I will say, death doula, if I can explain what they do, I kind of see them as working in three buckets, right? Preparing
Mhm.
people for the end, helping them during the transition process, like people that are actively dying, and helping people at after death, like their family. So for me, I focus more on the before, preparing for death. So I give workshops, I help people plan I guess sometimes I might help them plan their funeral, but just plan for the end. So help them take inventory of what they need, what they already have, so that they can be set up and that their family can be set up after they pass. I have done some work with people who are actively transitioning, who are in hospice. And so that looks like a death doula that works with people who are actively dying. They might help with the palliative care. They might provide the family, like the caregiver, a break. Sometimes they do Reiki, sometimes they do aromatherapy and a comforting touch. And they just help the person just be comfortable during that time. They'll hold vigil, and they'll also help help the person who is about to pass, help them fulfill their wishes and give them a certain type of ceremony. Because some people think that, when you die, you just die, you go to the funeral home and they bury you. But there's so many different types of burials that you can do. So death doulas can help with that. And then at the end, a death doula can also help with the family with grief support and help families close out accounts and things like that, because it's very exhausting to have to call creditors, banks, different places over and over to tell, them that that person has passed away. So a death doula can help and come in and help you do that, so you don't have to overexert yourself and kind of like re-traumatize yourself every time you're trying to handle things and close things out. So death doulas do a lot. I only work with the before, and I do work with the during on a case by case basis.
Okay. It sounds like a very multifaceted role that death doulas play. You mentioned that, this is something you came into at a very young age. You became fascinated by it. You also, I think, mentioned, did you say that you were raised in Christianity?
I was raised Pentecostal.
Okay. So I'm wondering, with this, and you said this was part of the Yoruba
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah. It's
How,
Ifa. Yeah.
okay, Ifa. How does that, were there any contradictions or any issues trying to meld those two, or do people, question the fusing of the two, I guess?
For me, so back in 2020, when I was going through like I said, my deconstruction journey, I actually left Christianity. I don't want to say leave Christianity. I don't use that word to describe myself, I guess. I don't say I'm a Christian, but I still believe in certain principles of Christianity and things like that. But for my life and for me, it wasn't hard to mesh anything, because I no longer, I think, go by a certain doctrine like that I was raised to believe. And like when I meet people who are Christian, I don't have issues with that, because I don't force. So the name Oya, that's the name of the business, but I'm not forcing or pushing any type of like doctrine in my business. So when people talk to me, legacy and death, like no matter what you believe, no matter what type of life you live, no matter what, like who you are, 100% of us are going to pass away. So when it's time to go, it's our time. So I don't really have any issues from people who are Christian. They know they're going to die. So even I have some family members and friends who are in Islam, and I, have talked to them about death. Now their death practices are a little different than, I guess, Christians that are mainstream, like even like like the American culture, like the Muslims have a certain way of burying their people and things like that. And just death is universal, and legacy is universal, and purpose is universal as well. So I push all of that in my business. So I haven't had any pushback with that.
Okay. Who primarily do you see yourself serving? Like, are you getting more older people? I'm sure during COVID, it was probably a higher percentage of people that you were probably serving or seeing to.
Yeah, I have a lot of people who are nearing their like retirement age, kind of want to talk to me about like, oh, do I need an estate or do I need a will? But then I've also had people, so I'm 41. I've had people my age and younger want to talk to me about end of life planning and what they can do, the things that they can have in place. And so it kind of like there's a range, just because, we saw during COVID, life is not promised. So, and anything can happen at any time. So it's funny, like during COVID, I lost 6 people, and it wasn't even from COVID, and they were all different ages. And So the people around me, they see that, life is not promised. So mainly I have been serving mid 30s, early 40s, and then some clients who are like in retirement age. But the people that I was serving who were actively dying they were elderly, 70s, 80s.
Okay. Do you find that sometimes it is very mentally exhausting, mentally or emotionally, or even spiritually exhausting doing this type of work where you kind of have to pull away and do some self-care?
Yes. It does get exhausting sometimes. I I think so right now my business is a small business, so I don't do it full time. I'm still at the part-time part of it. I think if I did it full time, it would drain me more. However, I will say when I was doing some work with hospice and I was visiting people who were actively dying, now I do it on a case by case basis because I'm sensitive to energies, and going in different people's homes, you just come across a lot of different energies. And you come across a lot of people who are dying or who are their family. Sometimes they have an energy of regret. Sometimes they have an energy of just anger that somebody is dying. And you have to be there for that. You have to take all that in, and you have to hold space for people in this job. Like no matter whether you're sitting with somebody who's actively dying, whether you're talking to somebody who has a loved one who is dying, or even somebody who is telling you about how they're trying to prepare for the end of life and they have regret, like, oh, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. So either way, no matter what capacity you work in, you have to hold space for others. So it can be very, very draining. So I do a lot of breath work. I make sure that I practice meditation daily. If I don't do it daily, I can just feel it. I can feel myself just being off. A lot of different types of cleansings, prayer, and just making sure I'm not laser focused on the end. I make sure I have moments of intentional joy, and I make sure I do things that will light me up because this work can be very draining.
I imagine anytime dealing with something like life or death, dealing not only with the person that's leaving this life, but also those they leave behind can bring up a lot of emotions for everyone. Are there any particular people that you get attached to or that, that maybe inspired you or touched you in some way?
Yes. I think I was kind of surprised that I had this feeling going into this situation, or actually leaving the situation. I'm surprised that I had the feeling. So, like I said, I work with people who are preparing for death and sometimes people who are actively dying. And I always said that grief support, like helping people through grief, was not me at all. Like, I just feel like personally, I can't help them. I feel like people need to be trained in like a psychiatrist or like therapy. You know what I'm saying? Because certain things come up when people are grieving, and I don't think I'm equipped to deal with certain things. But I was assigned to a gentleman who was in hospice, and he actually was he worked outside. I didn't ask exactly what his role was when he was working, but some type of scientist. And he would be outside a lot, and he loved birds, and he would love birds so much that he would hear them. He wouldn't see them outside, but he would hear them. He would tell you what kind of bird that was. And I was like, man, that is just very fascinating. And so, as he was dying, I would play bird sounds for him, and just to kind of keep him, at peace, and just, I want to hear him to hear something that he enjoyed. And, you know, his wife I was giving her a break because she couldn't always be with him. And I would talk to her a lot on the phone. And one day I was about to go and see him, and she called me and she was like, he just passed away. And I was like, okay. And, I said my goodbyes to her. And I was surprised that I was sad because I could no longer talk to her. And I was worried about her and I wanted to hold space for her. And I was like, Erin, you don't do grief. Like, what are you doing? But that situation kind of like, it struck me. And if I can find a way to hold space for people after it happens, then I will. But just a feeling of just wanting to do something for her struck me because I was so focused on him the majority of the time. So that kind of left me with it still like triggers, like tugs at my heart.
You do some very important work. I often say just from, just experience, even my own father, a lot of us, I don't know whether it is because of history or because of what's kind of passed down to us
Mm.
as African Americans, but sometimes we just are not prepared. Even younger people, like we don't think of, life insurance, will that
Mhm.
complicated stuff that would prepare us and our families after we leave this place. So I just wonder, do you find that a common thing that families just are not prepared or are ill
Mm.
prepared?
Very ill prepared. And that's one of the reasons why I started. So I have a workshop that I give from time to time. It's called Starting the Conversation. And it's just starting the conversation of talking about the end of life because nobody wants, and I don't say nobody, but a lot of people are scared of talking about death, especially in the African American community. They're like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. They think that talking about it is going to make it happen sooner,
Mhm.
or they don't want to confront things that are very uncomfortable to talk about. And so I created, a workshop, and I even created like an ebook of, hey, it's okay to start the conversation. Here's how you start the conversation. Here's what you need just to kind of like take inventory of what you have. Like it's okay to think about the end at any age to be prepared. Because a lot of times I see, and I know that you probably see, you're scrolling on Facebook and somebody's died and it's a GoFundMe page because nobody had insurance and things just weren't well thought out. And you wait till the end and you're scrambling, trying to figure out how you're going to bury this person, how you're going to survive without them. And they didn't have insurance. And I actually have a personal, situation that happened with my grandparents. And growing up, where I grew up, my grandparents' house was a very lively place. My grandfather decorated the house for Christmas, and people would come all over like the community and look at his house. And for holidays, people would come over and eat. And it was a very lively house growing up. And then they got older, they didn't do the things that, they needed to do to make sure that house stayed in the family. They didn't have a will. They didn't have, the things that you needed. And today that house is now a parking lot and it's not owned by the family. And that just was like, I have a brick, that I was able to get when they demolished it. And it's like they lived until they were 80, like 84, 85. And it's just like all that time, all that work, all the memories is now just dust, right? So I find that a lot of people do not prepare and do not have those conversations. And yes, it is uncomfortable, but it's a necessary thing to have, and then necessary preparations need to happen. Hello? Can you still hear me? I can't hear you if you're talking. Hello? I don't hear it. I don't hear anything. Uh, Hello? Okay, I can hear you now. No, it's okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, you still there?
Yes.